So it's a great pleasure to be with you today. I have, of course, a great connection to music. I was a professional musician for 17 years. I made about 20 records. I ran, maybe half a dozen music schools. I'm from Germany originally, but I moved to America when I was 22 and went to Berklee College of Music in Boston. I had a scholarship there, and then I spent 17 years in the US recording and touring, based in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And I had a great time as a musician, but at a certain point I had to realize I probably wasn't quite good enough as a musician to make it to the top levels where I wanted to go. It was kind of an interesting transition then at that point where I realized that I had more ambitions to do other things apart from just playing. I quite literally played music for 17 hours a day, every day. I'm sure you know what that feels like for roughly 20 years, And in fact, here I brought this special gift for you. This is a video from 1991. You see, I look almost the same today. No, just kidding. I made a video. I was very much into media already then. This is called Guitar Concepts. And it's from 1991. Teaching basically guitar through video, right? So I was quite enterprising already at that time. But suffice to say, that I'm really strongly connected to music. I went on to start a bunch of startups in the digital music space. I started a company like Spotify in 1997, way too early. We went bankrupt in 2001. And then basically I wrote the book that defined most of the music industry today, called The Future of Music. And in the book, we talked about a concept that I got from David Bowie when we were interviewing David Bowie in 1999 or so. He said, music will be like water. Right? And we said, oh, that's a great idea, music like water on the internet and the cloud, on the mobile, right? And so I started a company to do that, but it didn't work. But then 2005, Daniel came up from Spotify and he started Music Like Water, which is what 160 million people are paying for today in music. So that's my connection to music. I'm still playing. I'm still a guitar player. I don't have enough time, but let me dive right into the talk about the future. So the bottom line is, of course, you can't predict the future. Right? I don't do any such thing. It would be foolish, especially today, because things are changing so fast, to predict the future. I kind of observe the future. And observing means I pay attention to what's happening, and I have a team of roughly 40 people around the world who are doing that as well. And we're trying to help clients, mostly companies, but also people, organizations, and governments, to anticipate what's coming and to get ready for a future and to make the right decisions about the future. Before I go further into that, I want to say that the future obviously is not something that is just kind of falling down on us, right? The future is something that we actually make. It's interesting to see how Europeans, for example, tend to think of the future as fixed or not done by Europe, and Americans think of the future as theirs. I've become half American in my 20 years there, but Americans think of the future as something that they make. Right? And this is clearly something, when we're talking about the future and education and music, we have to keep reminding ourselves that we are making that future. And apart from everything that's happening, here are the 10 top trends you have to be aware of. I call them the game changers. And I'll send you the PDF later so you can download the slides here. But basically all that stuff that's happening around us, from data mining to music in the cloud to Internet of Things and voice control and artificial intelligence, which I'll talk about later, virtuality. It's basically science fiction is becoming science fact, right? The things that we talked about 10 years, they're here now. The things that we will talk about in 10 years, they are so far beyond even our imagination. We're going to be speaking to machines as if they were people. We already are doing that. Right? We're going to have roughly 9 billion people on the internet. That's like more than 2 times as today, connected at high speed. You're going to be able to have a holographic concert from your mobile phone in 90% of the world's places. Madness, right? When you think about all the stuff that technology brings. So where that's taken us clearly is into a world that is in many ways upside down. and especially now with the COVID crisis. I think it's very safe to say that we are not going back to normal. Even before the COVID crisis, we are going to go back to restaurants and bars and fly in airplanes and so on, and concerts, of course, right? But the way that people think about the future is completely different than before the COVID crisis. And I think that's in many ways good, in other ways not so good. But now we're entering a 10-year process of dramatic change. So, for example, the role of human beings has been cut down a little bit by technology, but everybody says, you know, that's really great that we can Zoom and talk to like this, but we really are missing people, right? So people are really getting into more human contact as an antidote to what has happened. And a second, the idea of saying we have to be prepared and work together. And all these things have really shaped our society. You can safely say that we're going to a place of where the COVID crisis is leading us to a deeply transformational decade. I think in most cases it's actually good. Some people have gone as far as saying that we are entering a golden era after the crisis. I think you'd have to be pretty optimistic to say that, but I think I can see the point there. I always say it's a deep transformation of pretty much everything. So a transformation of business, transformation of tourism, transformation of entertainment, right? And transformation, for example, in healthcare, clearly, in every possible way. You can see, for example, now that people are saying the COVID crisis was just sort of a test run for climate change. So climate change is now being taken serious because we may have as many as 20 million people die from COVID eventually. Climate change, we're looking at 200 million people, just not next year, right? So we're looking at basically another need for action. So very, very important to see that we're going through this reset, okay? And technology is making that happen. Here's an example of great technology. This is an app called GPT-3. And what it does, it's using artificial intelligence to give you answers from famous people, dead or alive. In this case, Elon Musk, right? So you can go to this engine, right? It's not currently live, but this is from YouTube. It's called Learn from Anyone. And you can type in a question or speak a question, and you'll get an answer from that person. So you can ask Beethoven or Darwin or Mahatma Gandhi or Elon Musk, and you'll get a live answer that's not pre-written, right? It's put together from an artificial intelligence that has read and viewed all of the content of that person. So now we're getting to the point to where that's becoming quite useful. Imagine if you're studying and you want to know from Mozart, you know, how did he come up with X, Y, Z? This will give you sort of an approximation of those answers. You know, it's a strange thought that machines can do this, but this is happening all around us. So I'm going to talk about that first because this is a clearly important point for music teaching. Artificial intelligence is basically about turning information and data into some kind of knowledge, like Google Maps, right? Or Gmail, you use AI, or Facebook, the news feed. That's AI. And then there's machine learning, which finds insights. This is very crucial for music, right? So an artificial intelligence software listens to music and says, this is the recipe for a hit, because it has found the patterns, right? Of course, that's not entirely true, which I'll talk about in a second, but deep learning then allows that to happen in processing data to make it more like humans in decision making. So we're looking at this feature in a nutshell, where we have those two different things, right, at the same time. Here we have the machines doing this stuff, and here's us, the lowly humans, right? We are actually not just one intelligence. We have, according to research, 8 or 10 different types of intelligence. So social, intellectual, kinesthetic, emotional. And that's what makes us not a machine. Right? So as my first key point, music is not something that you can make with machines. Right? You can use machines to make music, and it will be useful, right? But it's missing the pieces that we have as humans, which is other kinds of intelligence. And there's a great saying by Hans Moravec, a researcher, who says, whatever is simple for a human is hard for a computer, and whatever is hard for a computer, for your human, is simple for a computer. And that really applies to music. So, For example, you could say, well, it's easy for a computer to learn every possible lick or combination of chords in a mathematical way. It's pretty hard for a human. But what does it do in the end with that? A human, for example, if I meet you in person, science shows roughly 0.4 seconds is what I need to estimate whether you are interesting or an enemy or a potential partner. 0.4 seconds. Without saying a single word. And that's what music transports, right? Music transports our ability to communicate like this, and machines don't do that. So this is very important to keep in mind as we're going into this future. You know, anything that can be digitized, automated, robotized will be. Right? So for example, now banking is automated, of course. Financial advice can be automated. The call center can be automated. Driving can be automated, right? Is being automated. So here's a question I have for you. Does that make us useless humans? Because the machines can do the work. Well, clearly not. Right? What it does, it takes away the routine work, the routine jobs. So if you're a truck driver, you can sleep while the truck is driving on the freeway, but when you're getting off the freeway, you're going to need to be human to handle how that works. Right? So it's clearly this is happening, that machines are understanding this, and the flip side of this is of course this, that whatever cannot be digitized becomes really valuable. That's where you come in. Because this is what music is all about, right? And music is not about logic. There is a lot of mathematics and logic in writing music, yeah, clearly. But music is about those kind of undescribable things, right? Creativity, imagination, empathy, consciousness, values, mystery, emotions. Right? Will machines ever learn emotions in the sense of having emotions? Well, it is possible, you know, maybe in 30 years, some people would say, but we probably wouldn't want that. So this is a really important thing about music and about art in general, is that it's not the same than engineering or mathematics, right? Which is also why the idea of an artificial brain is interesting, and we see that everywhere around us. And machines writing songs, and machines making movies, right? Not impossible. But this is what Luciano Floridi says, the AI researcher. Algorithms outperform humans when it's not about anything like emotional states, intentions, interpretations. Right? Now you think about that for your own life. In our own life, all that stuff is much more important than data and logic and facts. Right? In fact, that's why we have music, right? Because music is actually not about that. It's not about the logic of things. It's about emotions, intentions, interpretations. Yeah? That's what makes it human. Nick Cave said the other day about music. He said, AI would have the capacity to write a good song, but not a great one. It lacks the nerve. So AI can fake to be writing songs, but it's not going to be great like a human could write it. That's his argument. Right? To which I would say this, using the scene here from Blade Runner that you may have seen, Blade Runner 2046, which is an interesting, you know, the guy has an artificial girlfriend, you know, a hologram, right? And he's very unhappy in the end about this. And then another scene of the movie, he's getting an advertisement for the hologram, right? If you've seen the movie. So we can safely say algorithms know the logic of everything, but the feeling of nothing. And this is very important for music, because if there's no feeling, then, you know, what's the point? Right? I mean, if there's nothing happening that moves us, there's no point, right? So this is really our future. Right? It is the algorithms, and I talked about this in my book, Technology versus Humanity. What that means, and that's all the things that make us human. And then we have the algorithms, right? The intelligent machines, the software. And this is kind of our future. So you as educators will have to use technology to make it accessible, to make it possible to participate, to be faster with your marketing, you know, the practical stuff basically. But at the same time, the argument for playing music or for learning music is not logical, right? It's about the experience. So this is the world that we're going into, and that's going to be not so easy sometimes to make sure that we don't get lost in technology, right? as we're essentially going into this world. On the one hand, we have science technology. And, you know, it's funny, when I grew up and I wanted to be a musician, my father said it's useless to be a musician, right? There's no point. It's a waste of time. It's all about science and technology, engineering, you know, facts, you know, good old German way of looking at the world, you know, from 40 years ago, 50 years ago, right? To which I would say, well, today it's quite clear that it's no longer just about this. It's also about the flip side, which I call HECI. And that is humanity, ethics, creativity, imagination. And nowadays, if you go and look for a job and you have a job interview, the HR person will ask you about your emotional intelligence, right? Your EQ. So really what's happening is that underpinning all the science and technology is what makes us human. And this is the reason why we should learn an instrument, because it teaches us how to be human. It teaches us about self-expression, about the experience, right? The not bypassing and downloading an app, but actually doing the work that it takes, right? So I would put forth that music is the key to our humanity. And art in general, of course, right? It gives us purpose, passion, curiosity. And in fact, now you could say that people that know how to do music, how to play music, they actually make, in many cases, the perfect match for companies looking to become more creative. That's in fact what happened to me, right? I went from being a musician to being an internet entrepreneur. And then a futurist, right? So I come very much from that side of things, right? So again, this is what's happening in our daily life. We are kind of, I wouldn't say merging with technology, but everything is becoming technology. And there's no way around. As educators, you have to embrace it. Virtual things, right? Real life things, of course, using technology, using better recording technology, but in the end, it's still going to come down to this one thing, right? The increasing importance of playing. And with playing, I don't necessarily mean playing an instrument, but playing with stuff, right? And this is the number one problem in business and around the world, really, is that people who are not coming from the background of being creative, they have a hard time playing with things. And therefore, they never invent anything. Right? They're just too afraid to actually step out and play a wrong note, right? I mean, if you were afraid of playing a wrong note, you would never pick up the instrument in the first place, right? So this is the importance of playing, and that is increasing. So I would put forth that music education is more needed and more desired than pretty much at any other time before, because technology is so powerful. And it's the antidote to this, right? Playing rather than programming, right? That's playing. And here's the pyramid that matters the most for you, okay? The pyramid of work. And that basically means on the bottom of that pyramid is a sort of data and information, logic, intellectual knowledge, right? And if you go up, it gets to be more sort of ephemeral, right? And this is really what people are pursuing, right? This kind of stuff, intellectual knowledge, logic, data and information, machines can do that. Right? Machines can write a hit song. But deeper knowledge, tacit knowledge, understanding, wisdom, so that's kind of the human realm, and we're moving up the food chain. So if you have kids, you got to think about that. Do not let your kids get stuck in the lower part of that pyramid, because there's going to be very few jobs there in the future. So let me wrap up by saying what's happening with virtual life and virtual experiences and real life experiences. There's no such thing as either or, right? We don't live in a world where we have to make a choice. We're going to have a seamless hybrid world that is part virtual and part real life. And now the technology is getting to be very doable, much cheaper, much more affordable, and even 75-year-old people are going online to buy food from Uber Eats and playing in a virtual band. Right? So this is all happening. That's actually a very good thing, because it leads people back to this discussion about, how can I actually meet the people that I've met online? It's a kind of, think of online music education like dating, right? I don't know if you've done much dating online, but you do a lot of dating online. I've never have because I'm married, but when you look at dating online, you get to pick the perfect person, and then you go to a meeting, and 0.2 seconds into the meeting, it was a waste of time, right? Just didn't match. And how do you know that? Well, you know, the facts were the facts, right? So online education is kind of like this. You can get ready for things, but in the end, you're still going to be real, right? So I'm a great believer in hybrid. Right? Experiential learning, you know, humans don't learn on the screen. Well, we can learn on the screen like you do now, you know, but the real thing happens between people. And this is always going to come back as essentially amplifying each other. So I would, for example, say if we did this thing here online 5 times in a row, you'd be very willing to come to a real meeting if it was positive the 5 times, right? Because, you know, you're further along and you want to meet in person. So that is going to be definitely heading in this direction. You're seeing this kind of stuff, virtuality, the helmet. I know you ever tried it. It's very powerful stuff. Not just used for games, but using for design, using for interactive graphics and so on and so on. Very powerful stuff. And that is going to come down in price. If you see this chart here, right, this shows you where stuff is going. Is basically going to become as cheap as a smartphone and even cheaper. So you can live in a virtual environment and learn an instrument, play in a virtual band, right? Is that going to stop real bands? And no. No. It is just an approximation that we do to pass to the next point. Right? So wrapping up, so what do we do now? First, let's be aware of this. We're going warp drive into the future, you know, Star Trek, right? When you hit the warp drive button. The future isn't slowing down, the future isn't going back, the future isn't getting any less complicated. It's going to be 10 years, at least a decade of rapid transformational change. So most of it good, but a lot of it quite nerve-wracking, right? So many of my friends are saying it's chaos, at the same time it's also kind of a golden era. It's like after World War II, right? It's a little bit like this. You know? It's a golden era of growth, but it's also quite chaotic, right? And that's where we are going. And so you're going to need this, as David Bowie had some really great sayings. And this is what he said about the future. The future belongs to those who can hear it coming. And this is going to be so crucial for you as leading a music schools and music education, is to understand what's coming, you know, and to pay attention. You don't have to predict the future, just observe it. It's all around us. Yeah? The future is no longer about tomorrow, it's a mindset. Right? It's already here. And so the most important thing in Europe is this, right? We think of ourselves too much like this. Like somebody came up and flipped the turtle and we just can't get back up. Right? Because we're not in charge. Right? And this is just not a good idea, because the future is something that we make, right? And the future is something that we actually create, whether we do nothing or we do something. The future is something that we make. And how do we make it? Well, we take a wider view. Right? Taking a wider view is where all innovation starts, right? So you don't just focus on what is today, but what might be tomorrow, like the car industry or the bank going to blockchain and so on. This is very important. So you focus on executing well today, but also thinking about tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow your first couple of band meetings will be virtual. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That all depends. But in the end, it's just one more thing that you can do, leading us to be more human in the real life space. Right? Great saying here from Mark Benioff from Salesforce, CEO of Salesforce, who said, "We have to get to the future ahead of your customers and be ready to greet them when they arrive." So I would say to you, you have to get to the future ahead of your students and your musicians and be ready to greet them when they arrive. Not run after them while they go off into the future somewhere else. That, I think, will be crucial. Alvin Toffler, great futurist, has a good quote in this. The illiterate of the 21st century are not those who can't read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Right? To rethink how we do things. And that starts with the process of realizing why that is important. Right? So one more thing on the experience economy. You probably heard about this. Whoops, sorry. 20 years ago, a book by Pine and Gilmore called The Experience Economy. And we're finally getting to the point. This is the key for music education. Right? The key to that is not to provide a service or a product, like a music school, university, or a good or a service. Right? It's to provide an experience. something that you really feel. This is what really moves people, experiences and relationships. If you look around the most successful companies today, right, Tesla, Airbnb, Spotify, Xero, Salesforce, and so on, they provide experiences. This is where you have to go, right, to the top of this chain, changing what people are. Right? That's ultimately, I think, what it comes down to that future. So providing a really powerful experience, that's what makes people come back, and that's what makes people actually go places. So that's kind of my summary. I could have talked for 2 hours, or I almost did, I guess. And now I'm going to be ready for your questions and your comments.